storytelling as a way to make it accessible for people to understand. And also, I think creativity has a great partner with science communication and making science understandable and making people get on board with it.
Hello, beautiful people. Welcome to episode 52 of our podcast, Photo Country. Today we have an exciting guest with us, Bryce Groves, a purpose-driven creative and an experienced art director with over 2 decades in the advertising industry. Bryce's journey is a testament to the power of aligning one's career with deeply held values and passion for activism. Talking about activism, I need to mention Magic Mind here. They reached out to me some time back to try out their drink. It's the world's first mental performance shot, and they have a 7-day challenge. So basically I have to try out this drink for 7 days and sort of experience how it impacts my life. And let me tell you, it's been magical. The mission of Magic Mind is to make me or people like me more efficient while also allowing me to have a fun, productive day. Magic Mind has nootropics, adaptogens, turmeric, and a lot of other natural products, and it's 100% safe. After using it for a week, I can tell you it has definitely made me more efficient and more productive, and the number of coffees I usually drink has drastically gone down. And what I really like about Magic Mind is that it's 100% carbon neutral. Right now you have a limited time offer where you can get up to 48% of your first subscription or 20% of your one-time purchase if you use the code Rajiv20, and they ship internationally up to 65 countries all across the world. You can claim it at magicmind.com/photocountry. I'll put those links in the show notes. So guys, try out Magic Mind. Take it from me, it really works. Moving on from Magic Mind, in this episode we deep dive into Bryce's unique path from the world of advertising to becoming an advocate for environmental causes through creative storytelling. We'll explore this involvement with Greenpeace, his impactful projects for the Green Party, and how he uses creativity to foster change. Whether you're a fellow creative, an environmental enthusiast, or someone looking to infuse more purpose into your work, this conversation with Bryce is sure to inspire. So let's dive in and get to know Bryce Groves. Hey Bryce, thanks for accepting the invite and coming on the show. Great to have you here.
Thanks.
Awesome. So I actually stumbled on your profile, it's through Greenpeace when I wrote to you, and then we got connected about getting involved in Greenpeace. And and I look at your profile and it's very activism driven, very purpose-driven, creative kind of a thing. Is that how you will describe your work?
That's, I suppose, my ambition of how I'm driving my work forward now. I studied advertising when I was 30, so I've been doing it 20-something plus years now. And gradually my path has evolved and I've sort of developed this purpose-driven thing. And this year I'm really zeroing in on that and making that a big focus for me rather than just sort of something I do on the side. But yeah, that would be my brand, I suppose, at the moment, is to be very purpose-driven, and not just activism, but also, I'd love to be involved with how technology can help the environment, like they use a drone, for instance. So organization uses a drone to map out the patterns of Maui dolphins, for instance. That sort of thing is really inspiring as well. So it's not just about protesting, but, anything that's going to help the natural world or people.
Right. But how did you get started in the creative world? What was the spark?
How far back do you want to go? So at school, when I look back at myself as a child and a teenager, I was clearly into design and visual work, but there's nobody around me that was in that. So no one ever said, hey, you should do design. And I had no idea such a thing existed. So I sort of fell into it by accident, working for signwriting companies. And then eventually I did a design qualification, and then that turned into studying advertising. And then it really took off once I studied advertising and started being at agencies with like-minded people and having these opportunities and clients that had budgets and ambition. That sort of went from there.
Right. And how does photography fit into all this?
Weirdly, I bought my first SLR when I was studying design, mostly because I thought, well, I'm doing design, I might need some good photographs and I better get a camera. And then I thought, well, before I buy a camera, I better understand how they work. So I studied up on photography and then bought my first camera. And then I did some night classes at Auckland University, and it just sort of grew and grew and grew from there. So nowadays I'm an event photographer on the side. It's sort of my side hustle to being a creative director, but it's a nice, lovely thing. You can go in for like an hour or a day to a conference or a protest or something and really capture the energy that's going on. But what I also love doing is working as an art director with the professional photographers, and I've worked with, especially in the UK, I worked with some really big top guns of photography doing shoots for pharmaceutical companies, and that was really fun because I could convey a vision to them and portray a vision, and they had all the gear and decades of experience just doing photography. But because I did my own photography, I was at least able to understand what they were talking about. If they talked about depth of field or lenses and things, I had that interest. So the two sort of work together.
And going back to your purposeful driven creative, where did that come into your, that, sort of that fork in the road kind of a thing? How did that happen?
I'm quite into science fiction, and there's a book that I read years ago, The World Without Us, and it was a hypothetical imagination of what happened if all humans instantly disappeared, with the nuclear power plants, how would they run, what would cats and dogs do, what would happen to the cities. And I sort of got the book as a sort of interesting speculative science fiction. But as I read through the book, it just stated that the state of our natural world, this was 2009 or something like that, I started reading that, and then suddenly, or 10, and then something sort of woke up in me about this, really wanting to focus in on concern for the natural world. And what I started doing is volunteering for the Green Party when I was living in England, volunteering for the New Zealand Green Party from England, urging expats, New Zealanders living in London mostly, to get involved in New Zealand politics and vote overseas. And that was the focus of what I did for a while. And that was something I did on the side of my ad agency work. So it was sort of exhausting because I was trying to do two jobs at once. And over those years, I started developing this ambition that I wanted to do this for my day job, so to speak, rather than volunteering on the side and doing capitalism during the daytime. And it's taken me a long time to reach that path and to reach that point, but I think I'm close to it now, on the way.
A lot of brands today have this sustainability story and a green story and so on and so forth, but sometimes it's just sort of greenwashing, right?
Yes,
to have that spin. Otherwise, people won't buy their product, right? What is your view on that?
I think as a creative, it's just a case of trying to look between the lines. It's not like I'm being swamped with clients wanting to do greenwashing through me at the moment, but just applying some critical thinking, I suppose, to the opportunities that come up. And it's an interesting discussion because, like, I saw there's some tree planting going on, and it's sponsored by Honda and Young Farmers, which is like organizations that are not really associated with the environment, but they would like to be. But then at the same time, well, I'm still planting trees if I go. So it's an interesting thing to try and to do. Yeah, it's an interesting world to navigate. And I mean, nothing's perfect. I mean, within Greenpeace, we were still using fossil fuels to go from A to B, or taking planes because it's impractical to drive them into New Zealand, and time is money, important to getting things done. So there's always a sort of balance you've got to figure out.
So have you worked on like storytelling projects for the Green Party during the election? And you worked on that documentary, right?
Yes. Yeah, Crazy Bloody Greens. That was a personal project, effectively. In 2020, because I sort of knew the two Green Party leaders through the work I'd done semi-personally, and we were locked in the country, and I thought there's an election going on, it could be really spicy, and that we might have a lockdown in the middle of it or something might happen. And I've got the time, I've got camera and everything, I'll just go out and I'll shoot some stuff. And it slowly grew in scope. And then I got another guy called Paul Dodge involved, who lived further down the country. He'd go to Wellington and shoot stuff in there while I was shooting stuff at Auckland. And I didn't have a specific shape for what it was going to look like. And then once we started editing, and then a friend in the UK who's an editor for BBC and Netflix, he said, this is really great. And then went through a whole process, and it slimmed down a little bit, made it. And my aim with that in the end was to make it more about the people than the politics. It wasn't just an election story. It was, who are these people? It was quite weird because, for me, knowing them and being attached to the Green Party, I sort of took certain things for granted, and I showed the documentary to friends. They're like, oh, I never knew they were just ordinary people. So that was an interesting thing. Sometimes you're so close to these groups and these causes, you don't realize that people don't know the things that you do.
The standard opinion of the Green Party or any left-leaning party is saying, say, they're too academic, they're too left-leaning, and this rhetoric about them being, frequently they use, quote-unquote, the word communist. So is that changing, by the way?
I think it's getting worse. I think that worldwide our polarization is getting worse. And it's also polarized, within. So people say, why won't the Green Party work with National? But equally, National won't work for the Green Party. It's not like it's a one-way conversation. I am the convener of a group called Kiwis in Climate, which is a network of climate sustainability professionals, which started in London, and actually, because of COVID, lots of the group actually moved back to New Zealand, and it's gone from 50 people to 360 in like a year and a half. So I'm part of the leadership team on that and supporting members to connect and have events and do a little bit of advocacy. But the founder of that is really staunchly about the group being apolitical, which I support, as much as certain, especially right-wing parties actually are quite anti-environment, especially quite anti-environment. You look at Shane Jones basically saying if there's an endangered species in the way of the mining, too bad it would kill it, which is anti-environment. There's no way around to argue that. But this founder of Kiwis in Climate, he said, interesting, he didn't agree with Greenpeace, doesn't agree with Greenpeace, but he said they need to be there, because if everything hovers around the middle, nothing will ever change. And like if you have far left things, you don't have to be on the street to agree with our environment needing to be preserved. But if there's nobody on the street and there's no one pushing it that way, the centre won't really happen. I suppose the same for the right as well. So There's a spectrum of activity.
I feel strongly that people's behavior has to change. We can't do the same old day in and day out. Our behavior has to change. Our consumption patterns have to change as well. Infinite growth is definitely not possible. It's completely out of the window. How do you think creativity can help change that behavior and mindset?
I guess, as you say, in the storytelling is a way to make it accessible for people to understand. And also, I think creativity has a great partner with science communication and making science understandable and making people get on board with it. And if you look at some of during the COVID lockdown here, and I think it was the 2020 or maybe it's 2021, they came out with a rap about getting vaccinated. Yeah, it was 2021. A rap about getting vaccinated, and it was like goofy and sort of low quality and cheerful, and there was guest stars, and I thought that's exactly what you need to be doing to not make it entertaining, but to really make it easy for people to absorb rather than being sort of lofty and certainly not preachy. Yeah.
Looking at some of your work, especially about the MS, I think it's really cool. Mm-hmm. Walk us through your experience with that project.
Yeah. Weirdly, I've worked on multiple sclerosis products. So I did a lot of pharmaceutical advertising in the UK. So I worked on a lot of multiple sclerosis, different types of products and programs and things. So thankfully I've never had it, but I've got quite close to it. So that particular project, the local branch of the global pharmaceutical company had 3 people, no resources, but they had this amazing online resource from the States that they wanted to get across to their patients. And it was like, well, how can we get this in front of them? And we don't have the budget for a digital campaign, and it needs to be sort of lo-fi. So brainstorming actually with the CEO of the agency and on this idea of postcards, of not only postcards being a tangible thing that you can pick up in the world where everything's digital, but thing you can pick up, but also a thing that you can pass on to somebody else. The principle of sending a message of hope and encouragement and humor to someone else who might be in your circumstances. So it was the same what we called life hacks, MS life hacks, as was on the website. But on the website, it was you could use a rubber band put around a jar lid to make it easier to. So I thought, okay, this is a valid on how to manage your life and how to make things better in a little way, but how can we make that bigger? And so I got this illustrator online, Natasha Vermeulen, and this was one of the joys as an art director, is getting an illustrator. And I briefed her and had the mood boards, and she got it, and she came back with these drawings. I was like, oh my God, you've got bears, with a paintbrush with honey, but it was just so joyful, and she understood the vision and took it to another place, which is just a joy for any creative director to have that sort of collaborative spirit. Yeah. And then so we made these packs of postcards that then we gave to multiple sclerosis community nurses, and then they would hand them out to patients, and then the patients would, in theory, like write on them or give them to other people. And there's a lot of talk, well, quite rightly so, but there's a lot of talk now about return on investment and how do you know if some creative has worked.
Right.
It's very hard to measure something like that. But the measure for me was the feedback from the multiple sclerosis nurses who said, tonally, this is absolutely bang on. It's not too worthy, it's not too flippant, and it's not too negative. It's just the right sort of Goldilocks mix of tone of voice. And that for me was the validation I needed, that this was the right approach.
Yeah, sometimes it becomes too preachy, I suppose. These kind of projects, it's the danger of becoming too preachy.
Yeah.
Kind of flat on its face.
Yeah. You see that a lot in pharmaceutical advertising, where they have stock images of some, or probably AI these days, of older people looking ridiculously cheerful, or they're kayaking and that sort of thing, and the people that are never capable of kayaking, or it just looks the same again and again and again. So trying to find that balance, but you don't want them to look like they're dying either. So you've got to try and find that balance where you're encouraging people, but you're not being unrealistic.
Yeah, it's almost like sort of become a meme, the typical pharmaceutical infomercial that you see. I see quite often Jimmy Fallon and those doctors making skits on that. And the other project, which there was some illustration about gut health. That is really those figurines that you made, 3D figures. Yeah, that was really cool. I really liked that. So talk us about that project.
So that was what they called a mode of action animation, which is basically how the drug works. And before that was made, I mean, there's the occasional exception, I suppose, but pretty much because most of the clients in the area were like science trained, and so they wanted to see molecules floating around, and it was all very, very technical. But the brief there was that, firstly, that GPs, this is in the UK, were seeing diarrhea as just a thing, get out of my office, I've got someone more sick to see. But actually, it was especially pediatric for children. It was quite an impactful thing, really affecting their lives, and of course affecting the parents emotionally as well, to be dealing with that. And so this drug was quite new, and it had this unique mode of action where it would deal with the diarrhea, not by slowing down the gut processes, but by dealing with the particular, what they called hypersecretion that was happening. And so it was a case of like, well, how can we make an animation that's A, going to stick out to the doctors, but B, be something that the doctors could show on their monitor in the surgery, or in this case, in this era, give out a DVD to parents, and perhaps the children could watch and understand roughly what's going on, and to make something really different. And yeah, it was down to very ambitious, open client. It was really, really great. And its client was so, either we got it right or she was super easygoing, one or the other. But remember, the only bit of feedback she gave one particular edit was, could there be some farting noises? I was like, okay, we can do that.
Bro, from my experience, even the most boring subjects, you can make it really interesting if you use the right storytelling techniques. So the more limited the canvas is, the more creative you can get, I guess.
Yeah. What I found with that project, an interesting challenge was, because I was paired with a copywriter who was medically, scientifically trained, also creative, but with that scientific background, and trying to make it short. And he's saying, oh, you can't do that, and you need to show this, this, and this. And like, well, we can't make it half an hour long either. So trying to find a compromise. I think this compromise principle can apply to anything now in creativity or even in life, is trying to find this balance between scientific accuracy and the creative need, as well as the creative drive, to make the message short and easy to digest. So that was an interesting challenge. And actually that challenge, years later, when I was in Greenpeace, other pieces, I was working with an academic researcher, and we had to try and write some dialogue for characters that would authentically portray what some focus groups had found about New Zealanders and their relationships to nature, but be actually really, really short. So for a 60-second commercial. So it was like that really interesting tension between science and accuracy, and creative brevity.
Right. Is that the Greenpeace video?
Talk Nature.
Talk Nature, yes.
So the principle is with the Greenpeace research that was done in 2022 and 2023, asking quite new people around New Zealand what they felt about nature, and pretty much everybody, especially in the regions, would sort of treat it like a confession booth and say, actually, I'm really worried about nature, but I can't say this in the pub or at work because there's a societal pressure to not speak up about these things, because they feel like you're anti-farming or something. And so our job was to try and convey this in a 60-second commercial. The call to action at the end was to speak up for nature, and then you could go to the website and then you could type in what you're feeling about nature. So we had a big blizzard of replies to that. But what was interesting was, after a while, the replies, you could tell they were sort of people that we called in the tent. Because in the green bubble, they were you could tell they were Greenpeace supporters anyway. It's like,
right.
Why is the guy in the ad using a disposable coffee cup? He should be using a reusable coffee cup, which is completely not the point of the ad. The point of the ad was to reflect our modern world, to reflect our real life, and reflect people from all spectrums, not to be preaching about coffee cups, So there's an interesting lesson in that, is that you can target your message. It is good, and it's worthwhile trying to target your message at all parts of society and try and bring everybody along, include people. But it's very easy if you don't keep that pressure on that people responding, or the people who are already on your side anyway. So yeah, there's some work to be done there.
Yeah. So it's sort of, this is danger of being this echo chamber, right? I mean, social media is notorious for it. So that's the kind of world we are living in, I suppose.
Yeah. There's also some studies that show that New Zealanders as a whole, as a trend, we all talk about clean, green New Zealand, and we all love New Zealand's landscapes and nature, except for Shane Jones. But actually, a lot of that is expressed in people thinking of nature as a playground, driving their boat around it and their jet ski. I was in Wanaka a couple of years ago, and there was this guy with his kid, and they were hitting golf balls into the lake. And it was just like, there was just this lack of respect for nature. It was just seen as a giant playground. So we can say care for the environment, but a lot of New Zealanders will see that message as care for your playground.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost like looking out of the window kind of a thing. It's always nice to look at. So if it's green, it's okay, it's good. And quite frankly, this whole pure New Zealand thing is, I don't know how far it's true.
I actually worked when my first job in advertising in MNC Saatchi Auckland, which no longer exists, but I worked on the Tourism New Zealand campaign, 100% pure, and did some posters and things. The creative director at the time, he was the one who'd come up with that tagline. He came up with it, so he was Australian, and he came up with it when he was working in Singapore. There's a certain lack of authenticity there. But I think it's also, I wouldn't, if I was Tourism New Zealand, I wouldn't suddenly discard it or make it 70% pure New Zealand or something. If there's an aspiration to it. And I guess the reality is, in New Zealand here, we have a very low population density. So you drive around, you drive to Hamilton or something, and you see these green rolling fields, which, if they were pure, they'd be covered in forest, but they're farms. But you see these green rolling fields and rivers and things. You think, it's beautiful, everything is great. So we have this visual perception that everything is beautiful. And I guess relative to some countries, it is. But that doesn't mean we should, relax and just treat it like a playground. Yeah.
Absolutely. And talking about your event photography, are you doing it as like it's mentioned as a side hustle? Is it paid for? Or is it pro bono?
Bit of both. So, for example, in I think it was February, I did a friend of mine she's a opera singer, ex-opera singer. I worked there in the UK, and she's on the board of several charities, and they were doing a thing in Auckland. It was a summer school in choir singing. So part one room was children, I think they were between like 9 and 12, being taught choir, not choir in the sort of church sense, but singing together as a group. And then there was also actual high school music teachers being taught how to teach music, in a really theoretical way. So I was asked if I could just go and photograph these people enjoying singing, which was a real joy, because I was able to support this community effort. But it wasn't nothing, So, and then otherwise, the paid work is important as well. But what I like about event photography is it can be mostly in and out, like in a day, and then you process the shots and you send them a long list or a short list, and then maybe refine a few, and then you're done and you send the invoice. So it's a nice way to get some work done, whereas a lot of the creative director stuff I do can be like months. And so it's nice to short, snappy thing, and it's a way to contribute to things.
Yeah. And why, I mean, have you thought of going beyond event photography and doing other sort of genres, or why only event photography?
Good question. I think the sort of photography I like doing is two types really. Event photography is a way of capturing the energy in a room. And so I like photographed my own birthday party, to be honest, a few years ago. And it's just walking around with my 35mm 1.4 lens and just capturing like my relatives and my friends having a fun and stuff like that. So I have something I love capturing the energy of an event. And actually in my family Christmas just gone, hung back, and my nephews and presents opening in all directions. I actually photographed that, people's expressions, my great niece's expression. She opens the thing and it's a drone in her face like this. And so actually capturing those moments that we don't often capture. So yeah, reportage and candid photography. I'm not so much of a portrait photographer necessarily. I have done it. And I also enjoy photographing nature. Especially there's a term, dendrophile, which is someone who draws energy from being amongst trees. One of the definitions is I'm just actually launching a new venture, I suppose you call it, called Dendrophile Prints, which is going to be a website where I see if anyone has the interest in buying some of my photographs of nature that I've been taking just basically for myself. But it'd be interesting to try that out.
Those are just like photographs of trees and
forests, trees, birds, New Zealand birds.
Right.
I was just thinking tonight, hoping to go back to the UK later this year, and mostly to see friends. And I thought maybe I'll try and find some of the best forests there and take some shots there.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, I take them purely for, it's not like I put them up on the wall and go look at my great photographs. I like, there's the process of taking it helps me absorb the energy of the place, I suppose, and it's like a compulsion. And I show them around friends, everyone goes, wow, amazing, beautiful. And so to be able to capture the majesty of certain natural places, or how it makes me feel, not how it looks, but how it makes me feel, to then try and somehow communicate that, even just to friends and family in a photograph, is a really interesting challenge. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see if anyone wants to buy them.
It's interesting because I was talking to Paul Kettle. He's a wildlife and nature landscape photographer based in Auckland. And he said something very similar in the sense that increasingly he's just going there for the process, and the photograph is the byproduct. Sometimes he doesn't get anything, but the whole process of being there, interacting with nature, being close to nature, that process is almost like therapy.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, and there's times when I was on the western shore of Lake Taupo a couple of years ago, and I walked through the trail, and there's a family of fantails, and I say it's a family because there was so many of them in one group. So maybe about 10 of them flying around me, landing, and I had the long lens, and I was just in like heaven, just photographing these birds again and again. The lighting was beautiful, and I actually got to that point where I was like, can't take it anymore. I put the short lens on, but just to try and experiment, because I thought I've just got so many. It's just like I don't know, man, what else I can get. Yeah, and that was just a beautiful 5 minutes, really. That I was just really enjoying it. But if I just stood there with the birds around me, I don't know, I wouldn't have felt as connected to the moment, or somehow.
Your brand is now this purpose-driven creative. I mean, how was the reception been from clients, brands to that sort of, I don't know if I call it ideology or outlook?
Yeah.
Or are you attracting a different set of brands than before?
I like to think so. It's actually still a work in progress. And I've been doing some actual study with a group organization called Wayfind Creative in Devonport, for that sort of loosely, it would be business skills for creative people. And there's some mentoring going on with that about outreach to clients and things. So I'm in the process of looking to connect with new clients and explain what I do, and hopefully, get on board with some larger projects, because the photography is sort of the easy win in a way, because everyone knows what a camera is, everyone knows what a photographer is, but it's often not very well paid, or it's just very fleeting. So I'm really hoping to get some larger projects or more regular projects and be more than just the camera, because I love photography, but it's not my primary skill, I suppose.
Right.
Yeah, I think my intention is to approach NGOs, obviously, but also agencies and also companies that have that purpose-driven co-up already built in. I'm not going to go up to Ford and say, hey, I'm a purpose-driven creative and I'd like to do something about your greenwashing program.
Yeah, so it becomes sort of a challenge, right? So how do you look at that? I mean, do you think New Zealand is a large enough market for such a niche? How do you look at that?
Yeah, I'll tell you in 6 months if I'm still going. But yeah, a friend of mine said the same thing, said, are you limiting yourself? But I feel like you need to, especially my age now, I need to be resolute and standing for something. And I've been aiming to go in this direction. Actually, before it was trendy, but it was just very hard getting in the door. There are agencies in Auckland, in New Zealand, there's some amazing agencies that they might just do that social environmental good work, or that might be a large part of what they do. So there is the work out there for sure. The question is, can I get some of it? And my aim is not to be by all singing, dancing, I'm going to do everything for you and I'm this amazing entrepreneur. I love working in teams. And so if someone says, hey, we need person number 4 for this project, and I'm only doing one portion of it, that's fine. I don't need to be in charge, or it doesn't need to be my idea every time. I just love contributing to stuff, in a decent, meaningful way. So that's also my challenge, is getting on the radar of the clients and the agencies that are doing this good stuff and saying, hey, if you need an extra person or you need an art director for a week or whatever, then that's enough for me. I don't need to be in charge of everything or directing everything all the time.
Awesome, Bryce. But closing thoughts, where can people find you? Do you have a website for your photography work and your other creative work?
Yep. So my main website is bvg.nz. And from there, if you go to the links, it says Side Hustle, and that will take you to my event photography.
Right.
And then if you look up, it's only just a Squarespace at the moment, and I'd have to spell it, dendrophileprints.squarespace.com.
Sounds good. Thanks, Bryce. It's great talking to you, and it's a change from talking to only photographers, and it's nice to talk to a creative director once in a while. So it's a change in scenery for me, but it's good because we are all image makers at the end of the day.
Yep. That's great. A really good discussion. Thank you. Yeah, it's really fun.
Thanks, Bryce, for coming on this podcast. It was great to chat with you. You can connect with Bryce on his website, which is bvg.nz, or his event photography can be seen on bvg-photo.squarespace.com. His upcoming venture, dendrophileprints.squarespace.com, is where you can buy his nature photography prints from. So hope you enjoyed this chat. Please do leave a review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you listen to your podcasts on. So before I sign off, don't forget to check out Magic Mind. You can find the link in the description. Till the next episode, this is Rajiv signing off.